welcome to part 7 of our review on some more of the Whispers of the Old Gods cards that have been released over the past week. Before we get into that, Blizzard has actually announced that the expansion will release on April 26th, and anybody who has done the pre-purchase will be able to open their card packs. Unfortunately, after April 26th, you will no longer be able to do the pre-purchase to get the 50 card packs and the special Cthulhu card back. The pre-purchase event will actually go away when the expansion is released. Also, if you are still interested in purchasing Goblins vs. Gnomes card packs, you have till the 26th of April to purchase them. After April 26th, you will no longer be able to purchase the specific GVG card packs. They're going to be implementing standard and wild packs. And if I remember right, one of them will allow you to get Naxxramas cards and GVG cards from those new card packs. The other thing that I want to go over before we get into the card reveals is the purchase of the Naxxramas Adventure. If you have some extra gold that you're not really using before the expansion comes out, if you purchase at least the first wing of Naxxramas before the Whispers expansion comes out, you will still be able to complete the full adventure since you've purchased the first wing. If you do not purchase the first wing before the expansion comes out, you will no longer be able to open any wing of the Curse of Naxxramas adventure mode. It will be gone forever. So if you've got some extra gold to be able to at least open the first wing, instead of having to buy card packs to be able to get these Naxxramas cards, I would recommend that you go ahead and at least purchase the first wing, to where you'll have access to all of the cards from the adventure mode, and you will not have to craft or take the chance of possibly getting certain ones from card packs. Now we're going to go ahead and take a look at our first card. Our first card is going to be called the Shifting Shade. It is a priest minion card. It is a 4 mana 4/3. It has a death rattle effect, which means when the card dies, you're going to get a copy of a card from your opponent's deck, and it's going to be added to your hand. This is kind of like another spell that priests actually already have. It's actually called Thoughtsteal. The Shifting Shade is basically going to be like half of a Thoughtsteal, because a Thoughtsteal copies 2 cards from your opponent's deck and puts them in your hand. The Thoughtsteal spell itself is just a spell that gets you 2 cards. The Shifting Shade is actually a 4 mana 4/3 minion that you can put on the field, and when it dies you actually get a copy of a card from your opponent's deck and it's added to your hand. So you get half of a Thoughtsteal and you get the 4/3 body added to it. There's another card that I went over, I think it was in the first part. That was the Polluted Hoarder. The Polluted Hoarder is a 4/2 minion, and when it dies you actually get a card draw. In this aspect, when this minion dies, you get a copy of a card from your opponent's deck. So it can be any card that they have in their deck. So it's like having half a thought steal. So it could be good. It's a good 4/3 minion that you can put down, and if your opponent decides to kill it, you will give them. Your opponent will basically give access to their deck to where you'll get a copy of one of the cards that they have in their deck. So it's kind of situational if they want to go ahead and kill the minion off. The next card we're going to take a look at is going to be the Servant of Yogg-Saron. It is a 5 mana, 5/4. Battlecry, cast a random spell that costs 5 or less. Targets chose randomly. Now, in the aspects of this card, it's a 5 mana, 5/4, so it's got good attack. It's got alright health, but the battle cry is the big thing. This means that you can get anywhere from a 5 mana cost Nourish, where you could get the card draw, possibly from the Nourish effect. You could also have it. It can cast. It could cast a Flame Lance on a minion. You could Fireball either a minion. You could get an Ice Block possibly from it. You could get an Ice Barrier. It's not just only spell cards. It also counts in secret cards as well. And it can be from any class. That means you could get a Freezing Trap. You get a Freezing Trap from it. You could get a Bear Trap. You could get a Kill Command, a Deadly Shot, an Animal Companion possibly. It could also give you any of the Paladin cards. It could give you a Blessing of Might to put on there. It could give you a Competitive Spirit, Secret. It could possibly, in the worst case scenario, if it is the only minion on the field, you could get a Humility, which would reduce your minion's health to 1. It could give it Blessing of Kings, which would give it +4/+4 if it's the only minion that's on the field. It could give one of your... It could do Seal of Champions, be beneficial to your side. But it's not limited to only mage cards. It could be any class card as long as it is 5 mana or less. There are some downsides. For example, if you play the card, it could do a 1 mana cost Soulfire. And if it's the only minion on the field, it's going to Soulfire your minion. It's going to die, and you're going to have to discard a random card. But in the aspects of the limitless spells that there are, there's at least 100, I think it's 185 spells that are 5 mana or less, and this minion could have access to any of those. It could be beneficial to the minion. You know, we could get the buff spells. It could be beneficial to our minions if we have other minions that are on that side of the field. It could also be bad. There could be drastic effects that could happen to our Servant of Yogg-Saron. As I mentioned before, you know, at the worst, it could cast a Soulfire on our Yogg-Saron Servant here, and we would lose the minion. So we're going to have to see how random these effects are actually going to be, and if there's a good chance that we could get more benefit from playing the card than more negative effects from playing the card. We're just going to have to wait and see how the card is played out. and what those chances for beneficial spells are versus our minion dying to um, spells that do negative effects. The next card we're going to take a look at is going to be a princess. It is a hunter legendary. It is Princess Harunen. It is a 5 mana 6/5 beast card. Battle Cry triggers a friendly minion's death rattle immediately. Now, depending on what minions you have on the field, this can actually be very helpful with board presence. Um, for hunters, you have your Sylvana Highmane. You could have this on the field, the 6/5 body, and you play the legendary. You could trigger this minion's death rattle effect immediately, and it would automatically summon two 2/2 hyenas. And hunters run Highmane, the aggressive ones. They usually play Sylvana Highmane late game, and the princess is actually a 5 mana card. So you could have this on the field. If you have it protected behind a taunt, you would be able to trigger its death rattle with it still being on the field, and you get those extra 2/2 hyenas. Um, there are other minions that you could also use it on. Um, you could use it on a Sludge Belcher, for example. You play the Sludge Belcher, or you play the princess first. Um, if you have the Sludge Belcher on the field still, and it's not died yet to summon the 1/2 slime with taunt, when you play the princess, you could choose this minion to cause its death rattle effect to happen to where you have an additional taunt on the field, to where they choose to either destroy the Sludge Belcher or go after the 1/2 taunt that you have just spawned. I also feel that this could be really good for the piloted Shredder and the piloted Sky Golem in Wild, because in Standard you're not going to be able to play GVG cards. But in Wild, being able to play with any cards, the Princess card, I know hunters don't typically run the piloted Shredder or the piloted Sky Golem, but if you're able to trigger their death rattle immediately, you play say it's turn 9, you have 9 mana, you play the Princess, or you play the Shredder first, and then when you play the princess, you can go ahead and trigger the piloted Shredder's death rattle effect and get that extra random 2-cost minion. There are other cheap cards that you could possibly use it on. You could use it on a Leper Gnome. You could use it on an Explosive Sheep for a board clear. You could use it on a Loot Hoarder for extra card draw. Let's see. There's some other cards that hunters typically... I think that's pretty much going to cover a lot of the Death Rattle minions that they typically play. But for it being a Hunter Legendary, it's a 5 mana 6/5. And the Battle Cry is pretty good in the sense that you're able to trigger a friendly minion's Death Rattle effect. It's kind of like Feign Death, except that you can only choose one friendly minion. Feign Death, actually, the effect triggers all death rattle effects immediately. But in this sense, you're able to choose one friendly minion and trigger its death rattle effect. The next card we're going to take a look at is going to be the Demented Frostcaller. The Demented Frostcaller is a 4 mana 2/4. After you cast a spell, freeze a random enemy character. Now, in the sense of casting a spell, you freeze a random enemy character. That includes your opponent's hero. Um, Now, I know you're asking, if I cast more than one spell, is there a chance of it freezing the same minion or the hero? And to answer that question, no. It is not going to freeze the same minion. Um, the way it's going to work is if you cast a spell, it's going to freeze one minion. And if you cast a second spell, it's not going to freeze the same minion. It's going to freeze a different minion, or it's going to freeze the opponent. Um, so if you have a lot of really cheap spells that are in your hand, say Mirror Image, Arcane Missiles, Frostbolt, any of those cheap mage spells that you just have in your hand, and you play this card, and you're wanting to get rid of some of those really cheap cost spells in your hand, um, it will do damage to the opponent's board, and you will also have chance to possibly freeze a big threat that your opponent has on the opposite side of the field. Um, but it is confirmed that it will not freeze the same minion or the opponent's hero twice. It will freeze a different minion each time a spell is casted. Um, the next card we're going to take a look at is going to be the Twilight Flamecaller. It's a 3 mana 2/2 Battlecry, deal 1 damage to all enemy minions. This card is easily comparable to a Mage's Arcane Explosion as far as the Battlecry effect goes. Um, it's basically getting a 3 mana 2/2 with a built-in Arcane Explosion. So a lot of decks currently right now are playing a lot of small aggressive minions. Um, we've got the Paladins who play Muster for Battle. They get the 3/1/1 Silver Hand Recruits. Um, they've also got the Stand Against Darkness card that's coming out, which summons 5/1/1 Silver Hand Recruits. Um, Warlocks have their Imp Gang boss that spawns 1/1 imps, and the Implosion, depending on the amount of damage it does, it summons 1/1 imps for each point of damage. You've got uh, Druids that have the Living Roots card that summons 2/1/1 Treants. We've got the Hunter that has Unleash the Hounds. Sometimes they will use all of the hounds since they have charge. Sometimes if they clear the board side of our side and they have extra hounds over, this would be a good answer to it as well. As far as the stats go, it's 2 attack and 2 health, which means it can be easily killed. But as long as we play it and the battle cry we get positive effect from, I mean, it deals 1 damage to all minions. Even if it dies the following turn, we still got that battle cry effect out. If our opponent has a lot of those really small minions on the field, this would be a good card to clear those out. So as far as the attack and health, it's very, very low, but I think the battle cry makes up for it. Since you're getting basically a free Arcane Explosion from summoning the card. The next card we're going to take a look at is going to be yet another mage card. Our Servant of Yogg-Saron was a mage card. Our Demented Frostcaller was a mage card. Our Flamecaller was a mage card. And here is yet another mage card. It is a 6 mana 5/5. It's the Faceless Summoner. Battlecry, summon a random 3-cost minion. So this is kind of like having a Jeweled Scarab here. Jeweled Scarab is 2 mana, and it's a 1/1 beast, and we have the chance to discover a 3-cost card. In the aspect of the Battle Cry, it's going to summon a random 3-cost minion. So it's kind of also like our... Let's see. It's kind of like the Piloted Shredder. It summons a random 2-cost minion. And then we've also got the Piloted Sky Golem, which when it dies, it summons a random 4-cost minion. So when we play the Faceless Summoner, it's going to summon a random 3-cost minion. Now, some of these could be good, some of them could be bad. On the good side, as far as 3-cost minions, you could get an Acolyte of Pain, which would get you some card draw. You could get a Brand's Bronzebeard, which would get you the double Battle Cry. You could get an Argent Horse Rider because it's got the Divine Shield. Let's see. We could get a Death Lord, which would be a good heavy taunt. We could get an Emperor Cobra, which could deal with our opponent if they've got a big minion on the field. This could be something that could be used to clear it. We could get a Harvest Golem, which you get value from it because you get a 2/1 Golem when it dies. You could get an Ironfur Grizzly. You could get a... let's see. You could get a Scarlet Crusader. It's got Divine Shield on it. You could get a Shade of Naxxramas. You could get a Spider Tank. I mean, there's a lot of cards that you could get that would be good for the 3-cost. The downside is there's a slim chance you could get a Magma Rager. You could get a Mind Control tech, but you don't get the Battle Cry of taking the opponent's minion. You could get an Ice Rager. You could get an Arcane Golem, but you wouldn't be able to use the charge because it's randomly summoned. Same thing with Big Game Hunter. You could randomly get it, but its Battle Cry isn't triggered. So there are some good sides and bad sides to the Faceless Summoner. There are some good cards that you could get for the 3 mana cost, and there are some bad cards that you could get for the 3 mana cost. But it's a 6 mana 5/5, so it's got good attack and good health. But with it being a random 3-cost minion, it's all up to RNG on if you get a good card or a bad card. There's a lot of cards that have this randomness to it, to where you're not sure exactly what spell's going to be casted or what minion you're going to get. But there are chances that you could get good cards out of it, and there are chances that there will be bad cards that you'll get. The next card we're going to take a look at is going to be a new version of one of the dragon aspects. You guys all remember Deathwing. Deathwing was the legendary that you would place on the field. It would blow up the entire battlefield, destroy everything on the board. It would force you to discard your entire hand, and your opponent would try and find a way to deal with it. And they have redone the Deathwing card. The card is now going to be, it's also going to be 10 mana as it was before, and it's a 12 attack, 12 health card. I give you Deathwing the Dragon Lord. He's a legendary card like he was before. He's a 10 mana 12/12. This time you don't have to sacrifice your entire hand, and it does not destroy everything on the board. Instead, if they big game hunter this card, and you have any dragons in your hand, that's Ysera, Malygos, Azrael Drake, Fairy Dragon, any dragon cards that you have in your hand, when Deathwing dies, when this version of Deathwing dies, it's going to put all dragons from your hand into the battlefield. This can be a very, very big game changer as far as being played in a deck that runs a lot of dragons. Some people will play some of the dragons early on, but if they have, say, 2 copies of them in their deck and they want to hang on to the second copy, they can use it to synergize with this new Deathwing card. You play the Deathwing, next turn your opponent big game hunters it, and it dies. They're going to have repercussions for killing the new Deathwing, because when they kill it, any dragons that you have in your hand are now going to be put on the battlefield. So this could turn out to become really bad for your opponent if they decide to do that. Yeah, as I said before, you could have Fairy Dragon in your hand, you could have an Azure Drake in your hand, Twilight Drake, Volcanic Drake, you could have a Chromagus that you didn't have mana to play, but it will automatically get summoned to the field. Same thing with Nefarian and Alexstrasza. If you guys have those in your hand and they haven't been played, that also counts for Ysera. That counts for Malygos. I mean, that counts for any dragons that you have in your hand. If Deathwing dies, they all get summoned to the field. So this could be a real big game changer for decks that basically center around a lot of dragon minions or dragon legendaries. This card could be it could be a two-edged sword. You could basically leave it alone and try and deal with the 12 attack that's going to be put upon you from the minion, or you can take the chance of killing it and your opponent not having any dragons in their hand, and they're basically just bluffing the card and playing it to make you think that they have dragon cards in their hand. It's kind of like those people now that, they play Reno Jackson just to bluff, and you think that your opponent's going to heal to full health, and you're like, oh, he re-healed to 30 health. I'm going to concede because there's nothing I can do about it. And once you realize after you conceded that their Reno Jackson did not heal them back to full health, and you just gave up the game, and you could have won it because their Reno Jackson did not heal them to full health. So there's probably going to be people out there that are going to play the Deathwing as a bluff card as well. We're just going to have to see how that card plays out in the new expansion. The last card we're going to take a look at is going to be a Druid card. It's a Druid minion card. It is a 6 mana 5/7, the Dark Arakoa, and it has Taunt. Battle Cry, give your Cthulhu +3/+3 wherever it is. Now, we have seen these cards in the past. Our Beckoner of Evil had a buff where it gave your Cthulhu +2/+2. We had the Twilight Elder that at the end of your turn, it gave +1/+1 to your Cthulhu. We had the Ancient Shield Bearer that if your Cthulhu was at a certain attack, you would get a buff from it. There were a couple other cards that were also implemented around Cthulhu. And I've noticed that of all the old gods, they're centering a lot of these cards around Cthulhu. They're really not centering them around Y'Shaarj or N'Zoth or Yogg-Saron. A lot of them are centering around Cthulhu. So, now as far as the stats go, this is kind of like the Druids. Where is it? Druid of the Claw. Druid of the Claw is a 5 mana choose one card. You have the choice of making it a 4/4 with charge, or you can make it a 4/6 with taunt. The Druid of the Claw is really, really close to the Dark Arakoa. In the specs of the stats, they're 1 point difference. Costs 1 more mana. It has 1 more attack and 1 more health. But the Druid of the Claw and the Dark Arakoa are both taunt cards. The only benefit of the Dark Arakoa is you have the Battle Cry of giving your Cthulhu +3/+3. So it's similar to the Druid of the Claw because it'll be a 5/7 and the Druid of the Claw Bear is a 4/6. So it's going to be very comparable to it. Like I said, the Dark Arakoa costs 1 more mana, and it has 1 more point of attack and 1 more point of health. The thing is this card can die to Shadow Word Death from priests, whereas your Druid of the Claw is right in the middle of that gap, because Shadow Word Pain does 3 or less attack, and Shadow Word Death does 4 or more attack. So the bear is actually right in the middle, and the Dark Arakoa would end up dying to Shadow Word Death. But with the buff of the +3/+3 to Cthulhu, it's worth putting the card into a Druid deck. But that is going to wrap it up for part 7. As I said before, make sure you do those pre-purchases before April 26th. You will not be able to do the 50 packs and get the card back after April 26th. And also, if you have any extra gold laying around, remember, if you do not buy the first wing of Naxxramas before April 26th, you will no longer be able to purchase the adventure mode at all after April 26th. So make sure that you at least purchase the first wing of Naxxramas to be able to have access to the entire adventure before April 26th. And we will see you guys next time.